Welcome to episode 222, Intellectual Ignorance, Cancel Culture, and Breaking the Norm with Branden Collinsworth. Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Today, I'm joined with my brother who has been on the podcast. I think now this is his fifth time, and I do that on purpose. Branden and I have a really, really great relationship in that we cannot see each other for a long time, and then in a matter of 15 minutes when we reconnect, we just produce magic again. We go off on our own ways, we learn, we grow, we process, and then we come back and just create and innovate and all of those things. And if you haven't listened to any of Branden's previous episodes, then definitely go back. I'll link that in the show notes so you can find it. But I love talking to you. I love processing in real time with you. Thank you for being who you are, Branden Collinsworth. Welcome back to the show, and excited to dive deep with you again, man.
Yeah. Woo. Now we're back. It's always an honor, man. You're one of my favorite humans on planet Earth. You're one of the most consistent humans I know. You're a master, a young master in the making. And it is potent to just always be in this space of diving deep with you and using our tools to up-level and expand not only ourselves, but our respective communities and humanity as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, every time we get together, there's some staples that we always cover, and leadership and love and how to serve at the highest levels are kind of the general themes that we really discuss. And now more than ever, the last 2 years, really just continuing to refine how we serve, how we show up, how we think. And, connecting with you before we hopped on here, we were talking about just how we can think properly and how to critically think, how to not get swept up into criticism or just cancel culture or embodying empathy and compassion and how rigid some people can be, ourselves included at times, in our own thinking that actually prevents evolution and growth and innovation. And so one of the things that you were telling me about that you've been thinking a lot on is intellectual ignorance. Yes. And so I kind of wanted to just throw the ball in your court and start with you and where you've been processing this, thinking about this, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke earlier about Aristotle saying the mark of an intelligent mind is to be able to entertain an opposing thought. And as I started out my journey, I met my first mentor, Mr. Mulholland, the Community College of Southern Nevada, aka Morpheus for my Matrix fans. And at that time, I had stepped into, quote unquote, the life of the mind. And I started diving deeper, really exploring my current paradigm coming from the streets of East Las Vegas and not really knowing much to being exposed to the world. And the first thing that really grabbed me was this really deep Afrocentrism of I'm Black, they're white. I need to get more in touch with my Blackness. And that's a byproduct of a society that's super dysfunctional because it places more on color of skin rather than our humanity. But at that juncture, I was drinking that Kool-Aid, and I had this T-shirt that said "Back to Africa." At that time, I'd never been to Africa, but it sounded great. And I was like, yo, man, they took us from Africa and everything. And I was, lost in that thought loop of thinking that was something that was woke. And my mentor, Mr. Mulholland, sat me down and he said, what do you even know about Africa? And I said, well, I know this, that. Like I didn't know a lot. Had read Malcolm X, read a couple other things. Long story short, Malcolm X story is super interesting because when he finally went to Mecca, he realized that all people were deserving of love rather than just one group of people. And that's a story that they often leave out. They oftentimes talk about the radicalness of them. But anyways, with Mr. Mulholland, he said, do you know the details of the transatlantic slave trade? And he said, you know, it was other Africans that sold Africans into slavery. So it wasn't just like showing up and like it was this one-sided story. There was also other complicit parties that have actually got erased from the history books. And he said, before you start to lean down a certain lane or put your stake down on a certain ideology, it's important for you to know it all, like research it. And so that opened up the doors of what he called the life of the mind. And he said it's going to annihilate you at first. Similar to Neo when he wakes up in the bubble that he's in and he realizes that he has been asleep. And it's so jarring when he wakes up from being asleep that he at first can't handle it. And as I started diving deeper into Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and Nietzsche, and all these different unique philosophies and worldviews. And as I started traveling, my world unraveled at first, which threw me into existential crisis and depression. But then it opened up the space for me to find out what is true to me, what feels best. And then love being my guiding light has kind of like allowed me to sift through all the stuff that is not that. So this whole idea of like intellectual ignorance has been something that has appeared to be a super potent, malicious, insidious energy that's flowing through our current world at the moment. And it's this idea that I know better than you, this holier than thou mentality that puts one group of people, one thought process, one ideology above all. And this, in essence, is killing the ability for people to critically think, because the moment people critically think, they're canceled. And in this cancel culture, this culture of like, if it doesn't align with the status quo or with big business or with big politics or big media, we're going to cancel you. It's also destroying the public square. And the public square is this metaphor of a place where ideas can freely flow, where debate can freely happen, so that the best ideas rise to the top rather than just one person's ideas or a siloed idea. And so intellectual ignorance to me is dangerous. And I put a quote up the other day. I said, ignorance is dangerous because they just don't know better. And they don't really have the tools to know better. And can we teach them? Yeah, we can probably teach them, but they might just not be equipped. It's almost innocent. It's innocent ignorance because you just don't know. Intellectual ignorance are people that actually are in positions to have the tools to know better, to choose better, to do better, but they don't out of self-preservation and actually ego. And so what I'm seeing and what I'm witnessing is a lot of people have the tools to actually engage in a level of debate we've never seen in human history, because we're at a level of exposure and intelligence that has never been, at least on record, in human history. But out of self-preservation and fear, the public square, the ability to engage in healthy debate, the ability to entertain new ideas is actually being squandered. Why is it being squandered? Well, I understand it. People played the game and they got tricked. They went to school, they did their 9 to 5, they grinded, they built some semblance of the American dream, they got their credit to a perfect score, and then all of a sudden, this whole entire wave comes into our current world and says, you have to think a certain way or all that's at jeopardy. And anybody who's not in that lane is actually holding you back from being back into your quote unquote American dream. So get on with the program, think this way, believe this way, walk this way. And if you do, you'll be rewarded by keeping your American dream. But if you don't, you're going to be ostracized from the community. And certain people are saying, you know what, I'm not thinking your way. I'm going to continue to critically think. I'm going to continue to question the narrative. I'm going to continue to lean outside the box. And those people are being kind of demonized as ones that are destroying the fabric of society by people who are saying, like, just get on with the program. Come on. Again, destroying the ability for healthy debate to be engaged in. And the quote that I love that kind of sums this first part up is like, it's not about finding who is right. It's about finding what is right. That is the foundation of a healthy relationship. And right now, people are not trying to find out what is right. They're trying to find out who is right. And a lot of it is based off of self-preservation and the fact that people do not want to see their more metaphorical American dream imploded on.
Thank you for sharing that. A couple of things come to my mind as you're talking through that. I think it's helpful to niche down into a small, tangible example. And for me, when I think of what you're saying, I hear truth seeking, right? Like, and your ability to challenge what you don't understand or ask just out of curiosity to a depth or a level that makes sense, right? And anyone who questions to the insecure, they project and get defensive, and then the whole conversation is shut down. And for me personally, I have a best friend, who is a truth seeker. And I didn't know this until recently. And he would always challenge my thought process, and in loving ways, but I didn't always see it in loving ways. So I would, just kind of, something would fall out of my mouth and I would just automatically maybe believe it without really giving it much thought because someone else told it to me and it made sense then. So I just kept sharing it, kept doing it. And then he's like, well, why do you think that? Have you thought about it this way? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, okay, well, what about this? And I'm like, I don't know. I hadn't thought that deep about it. And the more questions he asked, the more defensive I became. And so then I just started shutting down, and then I just started withdrawing, and then I just started trying to change the subject. And we are super close, and we've built that type of relationship where we could be honest with each other. And he's like, dude, I'm not trying to attack you. And I'm like, I feel like you are. He's like, no, what I'm really trying to do is find the truth. And what you're saying, I haven't found it yet. So I'm trying to question it until it makes sense on my end. And once I understood that, then I took the focus and spotlight off of me, which is an ego. Like, you're attacking me, you're making me look dumb. I can't support this based on what you're asking. So now I have to get defensive. And I shifted it onto the topic itself. And together, we were able to find a deeper level of understanding to what I brought to the table. And we both walked away from that conversation smarter, sharper, and more collaborative. And
right.
So I think that right there is just a micro example of what we can do in more situations. So there's point one. Point two is there's something called sunken cost fallacy, where once we commit to something, and let's say it no longer aligns, there's pressure to keep it going because we've already invested so much into it. And so because we've invested in it, it's like we feel obligated to have to keep it up. And this is it can be one of the most detrimental thought processes that we have as human beings, because it's like, would you just continue something that doesn't serve you or doesn't serve the people or doesn't serve your community just because you don't want to, quote unquote, start over or pivot or shift? We have to be more aware than that. Otherwise, we're going to get caught in systems that are going to restrict freedoms, that are going to prevent us from questioning, from learning, from growing, from expanding, and from our creativity will be zapped because we haven't been exposed to newness. So that's point two. And then newness is so valuable, and it's not always easy, but it's valuable because it leads to innovation. And we have to always keep innovating. Change is always the core tenet of what life is. So if we're trying to fight that all the time by keeping some standard, which is helpful in some situations, but over time, not as helpful as evolution is, then again, we're trapping ourselves in what will eventually become mediocrity or stagnation, which eventually leads to the death of a lot of things that we find valuable. So that's what comes up for me when you were saying things.
Yeah, brother. Powerful and potent. And to some detriment, people will hold on to old ideology, even if it destroys the whole tribe. You know, it's like some old school, I'm thinking of like some old school depiction of like the wheel was created. And one guy in the whole tribe is like, we will not use this wheel because it's not how we used to do things. And inevitably, there are better ways. And it just takes sometimes, you know, that's why I think it's so powerful to be one of the crazy ones, because those are the ones that inevitably, as Steve Jobs would say, shift the world forward. Yesterday, I was thinking about this concept of the lynch mob. And, you know, in this world of cancel culture, it is a metaphorical lynch mob. Back in the day, there would be this fervor of energy when it came around, quote unquote, something happening in the South and they wanting to enact their vengeance on a Black man or something like that. And a lynch mob would form, and it would go from 2 people to 4 people to 6 people to hundreds of people, not even knowing why they're buying into a certain energy. And then you get these pictures of people doing these malicious things without even realizing or questioning it. They're following the crowd. And that's the absolute antithesis of being a leader, is crowd following. You have to be one to step into the front of the crowd and question, why are we walking this way? And being willing to walk alone in the right direction long enough by yourself, even if it means, like, you know, you're going to be solo for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I think about things like Muhammad Ali and what he stood for, and how he was considered like a disgrace to America for questioning the narrative. So many patriotic Americans were like, why would he not go to war? He is the heavyweight champion. He should not turn down the draft. And he said, I'm not turning down the draft because it's against my values. Fast forward 20, 30 years, he's considered one of the most iconic sports figures of our times for standing in his truth. I can only imagine right now, when we flash forward 20, 30 years, how many people are lost in the sauce and they're saying, this is what I stand for, just like the people who were saying, this is what I stood for going against Muhammad Ali, or this is what I stood for when I'm standing in a lynch mob and somebody's getting hung. I can only imagine 20, 30 years from now, people looking back and being like, whoa, I should have thought differently. I should have been open to something different. And so it's innocent, and it's also not innocent. And people don't realize that the act of not critically thinking on the surface may seem like it's just like a little surface scratch. But when we go deeper, it's the same thinking that has gotten people killed, that has started wars, that has marginalized people, that has perpetuated racism, that has created more division. And so this art of critical thinking is more important now than ever. And the intellectuals that are shunning critical thinking, they're actually they're perpetuating like a covert evil, I would say, that is completely opposite of what love would do.
Yeah. Do you think that this will ever end? Like, or do you think it's going to be a constant dance for as long as humanity is a thing?
That's a great question, man. I remember we were sitting there in Machu Picchu talking about it. You know, it's been really interesting as of late. I remember, you know, I was a couple of weeks ago speaking in Austin, and all these guys, like, after they were all hyped up, they're like, I'm the center of the universe. I'm the next Muhammad Ali. I'm going to leave this legacy that everybody's going to remember. And like, I think about guys like Martin Luther King and John Lennon and Bob Marley, and they were the outliers. They were the pinnacle of their genres. Martin Luther King stood in front of 2 million people, 3 million people in Washington, D.C. and said, I have a dream. Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion of the world. I'm going to use my heavyweight title to change this world. And John Lennon, I'm singing music for the world, and Bob Marley. And there's still the same dramas going on. Mm-hmm. So legacy on that level, if anybody thinks that they are going to change the world in that fashion, is stuck in their ego. Personally, this is what I'm starting to believe. But the flip side to that is that I don't think we're supposed to be the one to change the world, but we can change our world. And I think more potent of a legacy to leave rather than quote unquote being immortalized and etched in the history books and a statue erected of someone is leaving a legacy of love with the people that are in your life, with one's kids, with one's coworkers, with one's spouse and significant other. I was thinking about this the other day and I was just like, that's really what matters. Making the people around you feel so loved and so seen and so safe that they ripple that vibration out, mm-hmm. which inevitably ripples out even more, which inevitably exponentially just continues to go. So like, can we change the world from the top down? Well, Gandhi did a lot, but not completely. But can we change the world from the bottom up? I think, yes, all of us can. All of us can be better to ourselves. All of us can be better to our family members. All of us can be better to our spouses, our coworkers. And I think that vibration is actually the space and place where legacies that last forever are built. They just won't be publicized on the nightly news.
Right. Right. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think that's there's a movie that I really like called it's a black and white movie. It's an old one. It's a Wonderful Life. And it's for me, it was such a powerful movie the first time I saw it, because it was an example of how one man in a community can affect so many individuals around him. And that when he was shown what his life would be like without him in those people's lives, it was just a different world. Right. And it wasn't that he was trying to change the world. It was that he was just being his best self to those around him. And that ripple ended up causing a tipping point in that community. And and thinking the world, I want to change the world is it's admirable to think that way, but it's too much. It's too much for any one person to want to do that. And even if that person could do that, it would be unnecessary pressure, and it just wouldn't be effective. In my opinion, it's much more manageable to do it in a small group. And what's interesting, I've been thinking about this too, kind of related to what you're talking about, is like, if you look at social media, for example, people have like 100 million, 2 million, 10 million followers. It's like, we're not supposed to know that many people.
Right.
Like,
right.
You post one thing and some people can get like 100,000+ likes and comments, and people are having opinions that have never met you, don't know your backstory, just speaking off the dome based on what kind of day they had. And it can affect that individual who's reading all of that stuff and cause them to detour from their purpose or their intentionality. And it's like,
absolutely,
there's a reason why we were born in tribes of no more than 100 people. Anything outside of that becomes too much to handle. And so
absolutely,
it doesn't mean that we should alienate people, but it does mean that we should be intentional about who we choose to spend our time with, and consciously choosing to spend time with people who make you better, not by agreeing with you, but by challenging you. And sometimes that means not agreeing with what you say. Like one of our mutual friends, Payal, she was like on 2 episodes ago in 213. She said, I love how she thinks about friends. She's like, I purposely find people in different areas of life at different ages and different industries to be my friends because it keeps me grounded in perspective. And I'm like, oh, so good. With that kind of lifestyle, though, it can be very taxing from a thinking perspective. You spend a lot of brain calories having to entertain and hold space. And by no means is that an easy job. But the upside, I think, to having that type of lifestyle is you understand life at a much deeper level, which allows for deeper levels of fulfillment, for purpose, for compassion and empathy, all of which strengthen relationships, enhance communication exchange, which can you can make better decisions, you can move faster, pivot quicker. And I think all of those, you become more resourceful. And I think that helps you build better businesses. It helps you be a better parent. It helps you mend conflict and help people find a common ground in which to stand on, even if it means they don't agree. And that's what we need more now than ever, because people are becoming siloed and they are shunning people out of their life just for not agreeing.
Family members and everything.
Yeah, especially.
And when the tribe is broken, that's when the war is lost. Individualism is the most insidious thing that we are, I think, dealing with as a collective culture right now. And just to go back to what you said, like the ultimate expression of ego is to say, like, I can change the world. Because then what does that do? That just creates that dictatorship of like, or that the God king that thinks that they have direct access to God and nobody else does. The better question is, how can we change the world? And in the concept of tribes, like there were tribes, there were like, we could just even talk about Game of Thrones. Like each tribe had a little different thing that they did. Maybe one is more warrior clan, other is more agriculture, the other is more intellectual, and everybody kind of feeds off of each other. They don't need to be everybody else. And it allows a lot of people to stay in their lane, stay in their zone of genius, and stay in their mastery. Mm-hmm. And so I hear you, brother. It's just like right now, more than ever, I think it is about going deeper rather than being shallow. Mm-hmm. And actually investing more into a small amount of people rather than being spread thin through a whole bunch of different people. And you're right. We're not supposed to take in this many bits of information per day. This is why so many people remain superficial with their mastery rather than being able to go deep in their mastery, because their bandwidth is too spread out and they're not focused on the right things. When you're not focused on the right things, the wrong things are going to take the energy and the nutrients away from the right things. And those right things are inevitably going to decay.
Yes. A phrase that I've been obsessed with lately is do simple better.
That's it. It's everything. Yeah.
It is,
foundations. Bro. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the common trap that I've been caught up in. And I know those listening have been caught up in is like more is better. And to a certain point, maybe, but most times it ends up turning into something controlling you. And now you're too spread thin. And now you have too many responsibilities and you can't do any of them the way that you want to. And so by focusing on simplicity and the fundamentals and mastering those, you can scale as fast as you want, or you can last as long as you want because your foundation is sturdy. It's built with intentionality, one brick at a time, with the most precision that you could possibly lay the brick, to borrow from Will Smith, you know? So like doing simple better requires thinking, because you have to discern helpful from really helpful, or good from great, or my time is worth this and not that. And a lot of people can look at their schedule and see all the to-do items and say, well, how do I categorize all of these things that I have to do? And and if you don't spend time reflecting on who you are, what your values are, what your goals are, and those around you, what you want your life to be, then you're going to just stay paralyzed in the busy mindset and not be productive at really anything. And so if you're not taking time to go through that, man, like you're just on the hamster wheel. You've swallowed the blue pill and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. It's crazy too how many people I think we both know, and it's kind of like a collective psychosis that people think, like, people say they want change, but the amount of people that actually do what they say they want is very small. I know so many people that each year after year after year, it's the same journey. I can even relate to it myself. I've had a guitar for 8 years, and I said I was going to play this guitar and learn this guitar. And I have all these tools, and the guitar, I'm still not dope at my guitar. So I think it opens up the opportunity for one to be able to say, like, is this really something I want to do? Or maybe I should just give it up. And that's a conversation that, at the end of the day, minimizes stuff so that one can be more focused on, like, what matters.
Yes.
Rather than being so spread thin.
Right. Because the potential that I'll play it someday is still requiring energy.
Yeah, right.
And then the mental battle that could happen of you like thinking you should, but you're not. And then you kind of can get, you can beat yourself up. Why aren't you disciplined enough to play the guitar? And then it's like, dude, if you haven't done it in 8 years, you know, like for me, that's the piano. It's like, I have this idea of what I would be like sitting at my piano late at night, playing this classical music. And no, bro, haven't done
it. But boxing, you pick up and you're like, I'm dedicating this whole year to boxing. Yeah. And like, you're doing it every day. So there's something there that is like, and then what happens is RAM, like memory, is released instead of having that iPhone that is overflowing and crashing to you can put it towards other things. And there's some freedom in that. Cognitive dissonance is the thing. It's like when you have two opposing belief systems inside, like one is like, I need to be disciplined but I'm not disciplined because I'm not getting this piano time in or this guitar time in, opening up that space to actually let something new flow in, or something that actually flows and feels good.
Right. And also what you said to that too is like, if I realize that piano is just not something I'm willing to dedicate time to and have that conversation with myself and decide that, then now I can appreciate those who play the piano even more. And like my relationship with them can be stronger because they have that's their genius, and my genius is this, and I double down on my genius. And then so my friend who plays the piano can appreciate my genius, I can appreciate their genius. And rather than saying like, I'm so inspired by what you do, I need to learn what you do, you know, maybe in some areas, but you got to really honestly check yourself and say, what have I been most consistent in and why? And find those elements, find those recipes, find those ingredients, and then choose things based on that, because you know that there's a success rate. There's a model there that seems to be working. And so just be substituting different activities or different whatever it is that you're trying to do that's new into that framework, because it clearly has been hardwired and there's something there that you got to really listen to. Otherwise, absolutely, you're just going to have a lot of tabs open on your phone, like a lot of apps.
Absolutely. And it invokes the potency and power of play. And in play, confidence is built, which continues to bring a person back to that thing that they're deriving that beautiful dopamine serotonin hit. What, you picked up boxing last year. We saw your skill level, James, go through the roof. What was it that brought you back? Because the same intensity that you attacked boxing, you could have attacked the piano, but you chose the box. What was the difference maker? What was the viscerality of it?
I think boxing incorporated more of my senses, and it was already built on. It was a stepping stone built on a foundation of activity. I grew up playing sports. I like sweating. I like just being in something. I like using my body, and also like being a parent and being a husband. You know, there were other elements of protection and being able to defend myself, if God forbid, if something were to happen. And like, so there was a mixture of activity, mental and physical challenge, and then the be able to defend myself and my family. So like those three strong pillars gave me the tipping point that I needed to be consistent. Like it wasn't just that was a cool boxing class. It was like, I don't want to just go to some boxing class and get a good workout. I want to actually learn the art. And through the learning of the art, it actually taught me how to be even more sharp with my mind, the importance of cadence and rhythm and timing. And it's not about how many punches you throw. It's about how you throw the punches that you do throw. Mm-hmm. And like just these elements that would never have come to me if I didn't stick with it and continue to stick with it up until present day. And so that is like a comment, like a really quick reflection on why boxing has been so consistent for me.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it like is interesting too. It's like these pillars, actually, your pillars, those three pillars were the motivation, where some people don't have those pillars and they're motivated towards something else. Because I know a lot of people that actually have gone into the boxing space, but they haven't stuck with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that in itself is, echoes the quote, know thyself.
Yeah.
And in knowing thyself, that creates the antidote for being immune to groupthink. Mm-hmm. Because one stays in their lane. This works for me. This doesn't. This is what I know to be true. This is what feels good. This is the lane I'm staying in, which kind of like is the underlying magic to diluting all of the craziness of what we were just speaking of cancel culture and like groupthink and lynch mobs. It brings a person into their power rather than trying to be like somebody else. They're being themselves.
That's true. And where's the line of that individual, let's say that does the boxing and realizes that it's not for them, as opposed to someone who doesn't even try boxing and just says, oh, that's not for me, and doesn't give it a shot. And their logic can be, I just know me, and that wouldn't be a thing, which maybe they're right, or maybe they just haven't had exposure to something that could help them. So like, where's the line on that? That could be also a slippery slope.
This is why it's so important to be curious, mm-hmm. and to continue to explore and continue to ask why, or step into new spaces. Environment, the potency of travel. We know the potency of what happens when one steps outside of their current paradigm. You end up seeing the world in a completely different way. I didn't become Hindu. I'm still like rooted of me that allow me to bring worldliness into the things that mean something to me. And so all of us are hardwired with this adventurous, curious spirit. Kids are so curious. They're exploring everything. Like spending time with little Aiden, your son, and seeing how curious he is. It's in us. And then somewhere along the lines, the ego hijacks the heart. And instead of continuing to be curious, it says, I know, period. And it doesn't allow for itself to step outside of the box anymore. I think the most important thing that one can do, way deeper than intellectualizing everything and way deeper than diving into like the like mind work of it all, is somatically putting oneself in different experiences so they can experience different things and get to know themselves from different lenses. Mm-hmm. And in that space, they're just going to find out who they are at a deeper level. Plant medicine didn't change me into a new dude. It just reinforced more of who I was. Yoga didn't change me into a completely different person. It brought out a deeper level of authenticity in me. Travel didn't eradicate my story and where I come from East Vegas. It just helped me synthesize it and ping pong it in a way that allowed for a better understanding of who I am. Mm-hmm. So it is a journey of the self, to the self, through the self, as they say in the Bhagavad Gita, the yoga. Journey of the self, to the self, through the self is really the only journey that matters. But sometimes you got to go on a deep journey to actually know that it's all inside you. As young Santiago and the alchemists went on the journey, only to realize that the treasure he was looking for was under the tree that he had the dream about his journey of. And he ended up going full circle and coming right back to where he started.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question that I was going to ask you. I'm drawing a blank. Alchemist is a great book too. If you guys haven't read that, that's definitely like a classic. Oh man, this is going to bother me. Dang it. All right. Well, I don't know where I was going to go with that. It'll come to me.
It's in the ethers.
It's somewhere in there. I gotta grab it. So
we were speaking about traveling. We were speaking about different spaces, places, and how it inevitably is all rooted in bringing us back home to ourselves.
No.
It must have been good.
It was good. I think it was going to be good.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyways. Cool, man. Well, yeah. So what else is, that's what it was. How do you discern, whether someone is worth your time and your presence when you've adopted a open mindset of, I'll hear you out, or, to entertain an opposing thought? How do you know what person to allow that interaction to be with? Because if you just did that with everyone, then maybe you wouldn't get things done. So what's your process of like trying to figure that out? In what spaces, with what types of people? Can you walk us through some of those details?
Yeah, on the surface, it's a simple question, and
right.
That is the doorway to a lot of depth. So I love that you asked that, and I love how your mind works always, like opening doors and portals. When it comes to just bandwidth, we all have a limited amount of bandwidth. And as you mentioned earlier, like max 100, I've heard some statistics of like 500 people is big of a community, mass community that we can actually handle. And like, for example, my Instagram is now almost 50,000 people. And I get people that get upset that I don't respond back. Or I get friends that message me and then they see me post on Instagram. They're like, why are you posting on Instagram if you're not messaging me back? And I think a lot of us in this space of being hyper connected are dealing with this challenge of like, really, where do we spend our energy? Because we only have so much time. And if we're trying to be really good at something, that time needs to be allocated in that space. And so for me, I have a list, I have a tribe, like who's my inner circle list that I update every year. And there's 50 people on there. And those are the people that got me. They get me, they get access to me. And I'm always trying to continue to nurture those relationships and make sure that they know that I am there for them. Because if I were to give my energy out to everybody like that, it wouldn't work and I wouldn't have the time for myself personally. Mm-hmm. I think that once a person gets really clear on their values and what it is they stand for, once a person's clear on their boundaries, all a result of knowing who you are, which takes sometimes years to understand, I think it just becomes much more clear. Everybody that I know who seems to be very happy in all aspects of life, like very well, they have robust social lives in the sense of they've nurtured a lot of relationships for a long time rather than a short time. And I think in that space, when you really know who you are and you're vibrating at a certain octave, we naturally attract what we are. So it opens up the doorways. It becomes a potent filter to when newness flows in. It's no longer a screening process. It just hits. You trust the vibratory pop that says, oh, this person should be in my inner circle. And then that, in essence, expands. Also, people who are on the journey like ourselves, we, for example, might not talk for 3 months. And then we talk and it's right where we left off because we respect and honor that both of us are on a journey that doesn't need to be rooted in any codependent type energy. It's just, I see you, I'll see you soon. I'm off into the woods, you're off into the other way of the woods. We'll see you in a few months and we'll share war stories of what happened deep into the forest. I think that's the power of having a tribe of people who are on the same mission, trying to be their best self, and who have acquired a sense of tools over their lifetimes. So long story short, to your question, it's just like the inner work is the most important because we attract what we are. And that becomes the most potent filter at the end of the day. And intuitively, as one knows who they are more, they end up becoming better filter. They end up being, their filters become more potent at bringing in what is right and pushing away what is not in alignment.
Yeah, I love that. Attracting who you are, and for you as an example, like, and how you think, you're going to attract people who also think like that. Maybe not think exactly what you think and that every idea that you have is amazing, but enough to have similarity and difference. And sometimes I think the way people are and what they attracts something, an identity that is very fixed, whereas yours is very fluid. And so if anyone is listening and you're kind of trying to understand this process, I think one thing that maybe you can start thinking about is, are the people around you helping you think deeper and more expansive? Or are you talking about the same things over and over and over? And the same things may be good things, but also if there's no growth in good things, they become bad things, or harmful things or disempowering things. And so I would just challenge the individual listening to find environments or find people that help you grow consistently. And that growth doesn't need to be 100% every month or every year. It could be 2%, 5%, 7%, as long as there's some growth. Because without growth, you're going to stagnate. And when you stagnate, that's where regret starts coming in. That's where bitterness starts coming in. That's where resentment and jealousy and envy start to arise. Because in you, you want to do something and you're seeing somebody else do it and you're not doing it. And so rather than sitting with those feelings that most people avoid at all costs, they end up projecting those feelings onto the individual that they're watching do all the things that they want to do, but aren't doing. And then you implode from the inside. And then you start ruining the relationships that you do have. And then you end up being very sad and alone and siloed. And that we don't need that. You don't deserve that. And I don't want that for you. So really take the time to dive in to you. More importantly, there was a story I heard one time about this person who was leading a training, and they had everybody write down all the things that they were doing in a day. And so people are writing out their lists, and he's like, okay, now I want you to prioritize those things. So people are like struggling. Oh man, what is this more important than that? Okay, cool. And then they finally got it. And the instructor goes, how many of you wrote yourself on that list? And like nobody raised their hands. And he's like, if you don't prioritize yourself first,
yeah,
no matter what you're building, it's not
yep,
sustainable. Right. And so it's just a check for ourselves. Like, are we giving ourselves what we need? And if not, now is the time.
absolutely. To add to that, sometimes when building our tribe, we approach it with the lens of achievement culture, and we lose the potency of simplicity. And I say this just from experiences that I've recently had, where I went over to my little sister's house, who, she's still in the hood and she's an amazing mom, but she doesn't have a lot of things to offer me achievement wise. But her love and just being there in the space of my nieces and nephews and just playing playing some video games, eating Panda Express, which I never eat, but I made an exception because they wanted Panda Express. They're like, please, they call me Uncle Bubba. They're like, please, Uncle Bubba, get us Panda Express. I'm like, all right, guys, I got you. It filled me in ways that I haven't been filled in so long, just being there. There was no achievement in that space. And sometimes we want to, like, when we look at our tribe, we want to put the filter of achievement culture over it, saying everybody in this space needs to be high level performers and all that. But the reality is like, there's just as much magic in the simplicity. There's just as much magic in like, and when we take that achievement lens and we place it on our relationships and we are like, you have to be better, you have to be different, we cut off the frequency of love. And with my mom, for so many years, I tried to be like, Mom, you need to be working out. I'm one of the dopest trainers in the game. Like, you need to. And it would create division. It wasn't until I just was able to accept my mother as she was that we could just go on a cruise and just kick it. And I'm not trying to change her. She's not trying to change me. I still know who I am. So her not changing into my ideals doesn't make me feel any less. But I'm able to open up that space of love. And I think that that's another thing that on a micro level can unlock so much macro magic. But on a macro level, it's the same thing as like us trying to change everybody into our thinking actually cuts us off from the frequency of love. But when love is apparent, it inevitably becomes the antidote for all, allowing all of us to find out what is right rather than who is right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like that love infuses both sides.
Yeah.
Like the tea bag that goes into the water, right? Like it's the water and the tea, like it meshes, it just flows in and out of each other. And that's actually what unifies.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Damn. Hell yeah. I love talking to you, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, bro.
Any last minute kind of questions or topics or anything that you want to explore before we wrap up?
A quote just came to me by Bruce Lee, and he said once upon a time, absorb what's useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. I think that quote right there is the critical thinking for dummies guidebook. Absorb what's useful, discard what's not, add what is uniquely your own. To absorb what's useful, you have to be able to think about what's useful, and you have to be a scientist and put it into an experiment. You have to trial and error it. And if it's useful to you, if it makes you feel better, expand more, and is inevitably there's a collective good for it, absorb it. Discarding what's not, knowing what's not for you, knowing what's not working, knowing what disconnects and divides. And then adding what uniquely your own is this notion that this acknowledgement that we are expressions of God, we're miracles in motion, and each one of us comes innately equipped with unique gifts. And so to bring that to the table, and that's when you get self-sustained swagger that is uniquely your own, emanating from oneself. And so I think this day and age, for more than anything, it's like being open, empty your cup. You know what I mean? Shoshin, beginner's mind. That's the antidote to this craziness of cancel culture and getting lost in lynch mob mentality, there's nothing more potent than an individual who knows themselves. And when we really look at history, it's never lynch mobs that change history. It's a few unique minds that have chosen to go against the grain, that are oftentimes called revolutionaries or maybe terrorists or something like that, that end up changing everything. And I only say the word terrorist because Nelson Mandela was labeled a terrorist. And then he becomes one of our nation's most iconic, our world's most iconic freedom fighters and leaders. And so it's really important when we look at history to be careful of what we label things as, because if we look at history, what it was labeled as and what it became is oftentimes different. And I just want to challenge people that 50 years from now, you're going to look back and you're going to ask yourself the question, did I stand on the right side of history or did I stand on the wrong side of history? And when we look to history, a lot of times when the majority was standing on the right side, they ended up realizing they were on the wrong side. This is why we got to be critical thinkers. This is why we got to be critical doers. And this is why I believe that love has to be the guiding light through it all. Asking ourselves again and again and again, what is right? Even if it doesn't feel right. And that is a deep dive into the self. But love is the guiding force, the guiding light, I feel like takes us exactly where we're supposed to be. And yeah, just always an honor, man, to connect with you. You're one of the best in the game, brother. I love you. I'm proud of you. I continue to see those brick building foundations that you're dropping. Position yourself in potent spaces. And I'm also proud of you for being so in tune to the simplicity of it all, because that's inevitably what's allowing you to fly. You're leaving a legacy within your small nucleus. And that legacy is the legacy, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. And it's friendships like this, brotherhoods like this that continue to inspire me to do that. So thank you for being there.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening and for being open to receiving our conversation. And if we don't create safe spaces for conversations like this to flow, then we're robbing all of ourselves of the wisdom that can be shared, rather than getting caught up in labels or egos or status symbols or hierarchies. Can we really just open up the space for an idea to be thrown around and for the best to be extracted, the worst to be eliminated, and for our own spin to be put in, as Bruce Lee and B has just mentioned. So yeah, thank you guys. Go out there, be your own 1%, and have a great day. Be the safe space that you've been wanting for some time now.